Ladies and gentlemen, we have a very, very exciting day today. If you have watched any of my market updates on this channel in the last couple of years, you probably recognize this lovely person here on Zoom. We're recording this on Zoom with me, Megan Aller, First American Title. I have been ripping off her stats for a long, long time. Not, I pay for them, so not technically, but I've been using her data, like you probably know. As I said, if you've watched one of these market updates, and we have the surreal pleasure of having her join me here on the channel today to talk about Denver real estate, talk about where we've come, where we're going, and the state of the market right now. I am very, very excited. So, Megan, thank you for being here.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. Thanks so much for having me, and thanks for ripping off and stealing my data. That's kind of how I want it to be used.
Oh,
I
beautiful.
want to be the Wizard of Oz. My job is to pump you guys full of all the information as real estate professionals so that you can take that to market and provide that to the consumer.
Yeah. And you've done an excellent job with that over the years. In fact, I will just little tidbit for the viewers. Megan Eller, one of the top title reps in the country, honestly. And if you don't know what a title rep is, that's okay. Basically, she's intimately involved in the real estate closing process here in Colorado. And at one time held the mantle, and as far as I'm concerned, this is still true, top title rep west of the Mississippi. That was an actual honor bestowed upon her. So you've been doing this at a high level for a very, very long time. Like I said, we don't need to get into the weeds about title and what that all entails, but it's a very important integral part of the real estate closing process here in Colorado. And you've really made your name, I would say, career, as far as I'm concerned, with diving really deep into stats to, like you said, help arm real estate professionals with the information we need to make informed decisions for us and for our clients on the market. And what I love about this is the data you provide is usually just provided to real estate professionals, but you're here on the channel talking to potential buyers and sellers. Kind of, we're able to use that data and help them make informed decisions for themselves too. So once again, thank you. So I kind of just wanted to start out by asking, here we sit in 2025. For the last X number of years, when people have said, how's the real estate market? The first word that's come to my mind is weird. It's a weird market. It's been weird really since 2020, weird in different ways. And now it's sort of a new kind of weird. So, just in your words, could you tell us a little bit about where we've come in the last 5 years, and sort of put that into context with where we are now?
Yeah, definitely. And I'd even like to go back further than that, if I may, because we've been through about 4 to 5 distinct market cycles since I've started tracking the data. And the numbers that we use to track the data really changes. And so, with your permission, may I say, look at this graph?
Yes, there it is. Yes, Nickelback throwback. I love it. Let's look at it.
All right, so don't judge me for my messy desktop. It is perfectly organized, I promise you.
It really
And
is.
so we're going to look at this guy right now. And so this is just detached single family. Attached single family is a monster in and of its own right now. And this data is through January of 2025. And so we're going to go ahead. I'm going to flip just to one graph. And so the graph that I'm looking at is this one. And so essentially what this shows is the inflow and the outflow of listing activity over the last 20 years, going back to 2005. And one of the numbers that I put a lot of emphasis on is the black area in the background. And so there's a lot going on in this graph, but we're only looking at the black part. And so on the black part, that is month supply of inventory. And basically what that means is at the current rate of sales, how long will it take to sell off the existing inventory in months? And we're not so much focused on what the number is or what it means. And we're going to go into this a little bit more later, I believe. But what is the benchmark for, is it a buyer's market or a seller's market? We'll talk about that later. What I want you to focus on is the number high or is the number low? Okay. So when the number is higher, that means that there are more homes on the market than buyers that want to purchase them. So the buyer has more negotiating power. When the number is low, that means that the seller, there are more buyers in the market than homes to sell those folks. And so there tends to be more power on the seller side of the negotiation. And so when we're looking at this back over historically, looking at the black area, you can see that from 2005 through the Great Recession that we started to come out of in about 2012 and really were out of it by the time that we hit 2013. We were bouncing anywhere between 6 to, at our hardest point in the Great Recession, up to 10 months of inventory. And so in that market, very unique conditions, and it very much so favored the buyer in terms of those negotiations. Now, after 2013, we ended up having significant migration to Colorado. We didn't have enough housing. And so what we ended up seeing was that we have this very, very predictable, consistent market from 2013 through 2019, where we were in between about 1 to 2 months of inventory. So when that number is below 2 months of inventory, we're considered to be in extreme seller's market territory. And during this period of time, we were looking at appreciation rates year over year that were benchmarking anywhere between 5 to 10% year over year, which is very high. A typical appreciation rate is we want to beat the rate of inflation. That means that you've got a solid investment in your home. And so the rate of inflation during that period of time was lower. It's between 2 to 4%. So we were far outpacing the rate of inflation at that point. Okay. And home prices were going up because there were a lot of multiple offers. And then looking at the black area here between 2020 and the first half of 2022, those were the COVID years, right? COVID years got crazy. Nobody wanted to list their home. Everybody wanted to move because they were cooped up at home and discovered that it wasn't conducive to an at-home work environment or educating your children, or the extroverts that lived in downtown Denver didn't like being cooped up in four walls in a condo. And so they were more interested in moving outside of the city. And so a lot of people ended up moving west during that time. But with so few homes available for sale and interest rates being so low, buyer demand was incredibly high during that time. And so we were well below 1 month of inventory. And when you're below 1 month of inventory, that means that you have more buyers in the market than homes to sell those folks. And we were averaging 25 showings per property per week during that time frame. It was off the charts. There were wacky things that were happening, people waiving inspections, giving appraisal gaps so they would cover the difference between the appraisal and what they were bidding over. It wasn't uncommon to see $25, $50, $100,000 over asking price at that point, just so that people could get into the home. Okay. Now, then, as we came out of the second half of 2022, interest rates started to climb. And so as interest rates started to climb, it became significantly less affordable in Metro Denver. And that changed the buyer's purchasing power. And so that diminishing buyer pool ended up slowing our market down. And we started to see our month supply of inventory go up. And we started to get up to 2. Then in 2023, people were still holding fast to their homes and they weren't listing them for sale because they didn't want to move and give up their low interest rate. But buyer pool was also still down. And so we had a lower listing pool and a lower buyer pool. And so everything still stayed kind of in relationship to each other. So there wasn't a big significant shift at that point. But then you get to the midpoint of April in 2024. And all of a sudden in 2024, everybody was ready to depart from their low interest rates and started listing their homes for sale. And inventory shot through the roof. But our buyer pool remained low in light of high interest rates. And so by the time that we got to the midpoint of 2024, our inventory was it started averaging 30 to 60% higher year over year when I look at that week by week and month over month and month to month for the same month a year ago. And so that all started in April of 2024 and it's continued into the beginning part of 2025. And so overall, starting out in 2025, where we are right now, is this could be what our new normal looks like. And we knew that this was very much so a buyer's market at this point back here from 2005 up until about the midpoint of 2012. We knew that this was a seller's market between 2013 through 2019. We know that 2020 through the midpoint of 2022 was a very unhealthy seller's market at that point. Home prices grew by nearly 40% in just that 2.5 year time period. Now, getting into 2023, 2024, and 2025, could this be what an average or a normal market is supposed to look like? Because quite frankly, in the last 20 years, we haven't had one. And this could be what it looks like.
Right. Right. Which is a little scary in a way. It was also scary going back to 2021, where, those markets were just, I called it a bloodbath. I mean, I was working primarily with buyers at the time, and every weekend was just go out, wait for the new listings to come up, make offers, get beat, cash, huge appraisal gaps, all that stuff, refill, try again next week. And so it was it felt like, and I think there were people saying, this is crazy. You shouldn't buy a home right now, having to go so much over asking, limit inspections, and do those sorts of things that were happening at the time. But a lot of people who got into homes then were really happy they did then because their monthly payment is so different because an interest rate makes such a big difference, right? Even if the home prices were higher, a little bit higher, it just makes a dramatic difference. And so I'm interested to ask you about April of 2024. Why do you think, and this may, I know you're very database, so maybe you don't want to delve into opinion there, but why all of a sudden were sellers just willing to give up those low interest rates and start listing their homes?
There's been a lot of life changes since
Hmm.
COVID.
Hmm.
And so, there's always those circumstances that start to arise where it's birth, death, divorce, loss or change of a job,
Hmm.
those types of things that happen. And while people were waiting for market conditions to improve after we hit April of 2022, I'm sorry, the midpoint of 2022 when interest rates went up,
Hmm.
there were a lot of people who decided, I'm going to wait. I think next year is going to be better. And a lot of the forecasts at that time, at the end of 2022 and through the bulk of 2023, was that there were going to be rate cuts and interest rates would be more favorable.
Yeah.
And so by the time that we got to April of 2024, the Federal Reserve had pulled back on their comments. We didn't make the rate cuts like we anticipated in 2023. And so now we've come to a point of what we call radical acceptance.
Yeah.
And so radical acceptance is I don't like it. I don't
Hmm.
agree with it, but these are the conditions that I have to work within. And so now I understand for the foreseeable future that we can predict reasonably that this is what I have to work with.
Hmm. Yeah.
And it's really about letting go of the past and hoping to return back to those 2 to 3% interest rates. That's very much so a once in a lifetime experience that we may never see again.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
so people are coming to terms with what the conditions of the market are and choosing to move forward with what they have available now.
Sure, sure. And so, and you've talked about this in your weekly emails that goes out to real estate agents before about kind of percentage of the income that's required for the median single family home in Denver and just how that number has gone up so much. So when people say, it bugs me when people say interest rates were 18% in the 1980s. My parents bought a house and they did fine. Yet the house cost $13 back then. The purchase price being so much more now, combined with an interest rate that historically might not be super high, but those two things put together, it's I was going to say it seems like, and the data bear out that you're having to um, pay so much more of your monthly wages towards housing. Is that accurate?
Yes.
Yeah.
You want to look at another
Let's
graph?
look at a graph.
Let's look at a graph.
If
All
you
right,
got
I'll
one,
pull it
let's
up.
look. Yeah, no problem.
Um,
Hmm.
this is one that I don't love. Because it's hard. And this
Yeah.
is this is the hard reality that we face here in Denver. It's it's
Hmm.
it's not a cheap place to live. And so looking back, I do track affordability. And so it is based off of let's see, P9 payment, this one, this
I threw
one.
this as a curveball at you too,
I
so
know. I
probably
know.
didn't
I'm
have any
trying to decide
stress
which
with it.
one's the easiest to review.
Sure.
I think this one is.
Okay.
This one's the simplest. There's a lot more complicated options out there. Let's keep it simple. And so when we're looking at this right now, this is the P&I payment based on an average priced home in Metro Denver, considering 10% down on a 30-year fixed interest rate.
Wow.
And it also takes into consideration what the median area income is for what we call an MSA area. It's a metropolitan statistical area, and it's how lending guidelines are determined based off of what is the median area income for this particular area. For us, it's Denver, Lakewood, Aurora is our MSA. And so they say based on the median income for this, these are what conforming loan limits are. Okay. Now, this is based off of the median sales price of a home in any given month. And so if we go back historically and look in time, back in 2005, I mean, and it's on the right side of the axis was how much your monthly mortgage payment was. 10% down, 30-year fixed, principal and interest only. So this does not take into account taxes and insurance, which have also gone up. So these are conservative numbers. And so looking at this, I mean, things were incredibly affordable. As we went back to 2009 during the Great Recession, I mean, we were looking at a P&I payment using these metrics that were in the low 1000s for a single family detached home.
It's insane.
And then as we ended up going through 2013 through 2019, you can see that it's growing for your P&I payment because again, we were experiencing appreciation rates that were between 5 to 10% year over year. Now, when you look at what a typical salary increase is for a W-2 employee, you usually expect 2 to 4% year over year. So the growth in home price was outpacing the growth in wages, thus impacting affordability. And so the red line shows the percentage of income for the P&I payment, and that's over here on this axis. And so we have a little bobble as we saw things kind of go up. Interest rates were hovering pretty consistently between the threes and the fours during this time. And then in 2019 and 2018, we ended up seeing that there was a spike up to about 4.5%. And that greatly impacted the affordability, just going from the threes to the 4.5% mark. Well, then again, by the time that we got to 2022 and we had gone post-COVID here, getting into the post-COVID years, home prices are more expensive by 40% just over that COVID 2-year time period. And looking at the percentage of income for the average P&I payment has now skyrocketed. And at our worst point in 2022, we were looking at nearly 50% of the median household income going to make your P&I payments alone. So it's very unaffordable.
That is
We've seen
crazy.
improvement over
Uh-huh.
time with some lower interest rates. Right now, we're hovering in the high sixes for 30-year fixed conventional loan. But right now, I mean, it's still $4,500.
Yeah, it's nuts. And like you said, I mean, this is why I love the red part of this graph too, is that it shows it based on income, and if wages had kept up with this, that would be different. But obviously that wasn't happening, and really there was no way for that to happen realistically. But what I noticed, if we can stay on this graph for a second, is that on the left side here in the 2006, 2007 time, we're seeing a reasonable spike, at least in the red line, right? Comparing it against percentage of income. And so what a lot of people want to know right now, which nobody knows because we don't have a crystal ball, but we're seeing that spike too on the right side, a bigger spike, proportionally on the right side of the graph. And so the question is, when is a crash came after the last one? When is the crash coming here? And you've talked extensively in your data about, at least in the last few years, we just haven't had the market factors necessary present to cause a crash, especially a 2008 style crash where housing really crashed the entire global economy. But when people are looking at the next few years, and I know you get this question a lot, what do you expect?
It's a really good question.
Hmm.
And my answer to that is it depends.
Okay.
And there's still a lot of unknown variables that
Mhm.
are yet to play out. There's definitely unrest in the political and economic world right now that we need to kind of wait out and feel out and see as to what people are going to do. Now, when we're talking about condos, condos have been really interesting. And so with condos, what we've seen is in a spike in the price, a spike in the interest rate, but now there have been changes in lending guidelines that they have to have a certain amount of insurance coverage for their master policy for their HOA in order to qualify for certain types of lending. Now, I'm not a lender, so I can't go into what those qualifications are, but this is a challenge that we're up against. Now, what we're finding is that there are some that can't afford that increase in their master premium. And so, what they're doing is they're passing that down to the homeowner by way of special assessment or dues increases, making it less affordable. So now they've been hit with higher prices, higher taxes, an increase in dues, special assessments. And in some cases, what we're seeing is that they're now having to increase their own personal homeowners insurance, or maybe not even be able to get homeowners insurance. Because, for example, if the HOA does not cover the roof for a condo complex, some insurance carriers are dropping them, and now the homeowner is having to go out and find new insurance. And so in that market has seen a significant uptick in active listings, and it's now sitting at a 4.4 month supply of inventory, which could be considered more of a buyer's market and definitely softer.
Hmm.
And so my concerns are with that for attached properties. For detached properties, homes over $1 million, most of them, like a good chunk, over 40% sell for cash. So they're not concerned about what's happening with interest rates and affordability. It's the people that are in the middle, which is the bulk of us. Okay. And so for the people that are in that 500 to $1 million range right now, those single family homes are the ones that need to be perfect and pristine and updated and taken care of in order to go under contract right now. And so those are the ones that I'm looking at right now that are most dependent on loans in order to get into a property.
Interesting. So, and just for reference, you said attached properties, meaning condos and townhomes, 4.5 months of supply right now,
Well, yeah, 4.4.
4.4, and then for single family homes, is it 2.1, 2.5?
Yeah, yeah, it was a 2.5.
Huge
Two and a half.
difference. Yeah,
Yeah,
huge difference. Gosh, all those, you have all the challenges in the housing market in general, and then you throw these HOA challenges with condos on top of that, and that makes it really tough. And that's why they're sitting, and that's why the
yeah,
prices, are much tougher. Um, One thing you mentioned a lot lately is micro markets, and that it seems like our market in the Denver metro is more broken up into little different micro markets based on where you are than ever. And it's like you'll have two listings go live the same weekend. One will get four offers and go under contract right away for over asking price. Still not 100 grand like it used to be, right? But for over asking price with good terms. And one will, even if it's a nice listing that's updated and well presented, might be sitting for a few months. What can you tell us about the different micro markets in the Denver metro, and where kind of the hottest, most seller friendly markets are right now, and where the most buyer friendly markets are?
yeah, definitely.
Mhm.
So let's look at another graph.
Perfect.
We'll pop this back up and we are going to go to, and we're actually going to look at something called the odds of selling. Now, I am reconsidering, and we'll talk about this more in a little bit.
Hmm.
Forgive me, I've got to figure out where it is in here.
No, take your
So
time.
I track the top 105 zip codes across Metro Denver, and I color code and benchmark them against what the average is in Metro Denver at that time. And so the average odds of selling in the month of January was 40.8.
Okay.
Okay. Now, I don't want you to focus on what the number is. I want you to focus on how it compares to the average. Is it higher or lower? And so, again, it's just a comparison. The essential way that I calculate this number is of all the listings that were available for sale during the month of January, how many of them resulted in a contract and or a closing, and what percentage stayed on the market or withdrew or expired? Okay. And so this is the overall odds of selling for those homes that were available for sale during the month of January. So for everything, this is attached and detached combined across Metro Denver was 40.8. So the way that you read this is if it turns orange or red, it had a higher odds of selling. And over here, we can see it says more competitive. And so that means that it's going to be a more competitive market for a buyer, and the seller may be in a better position to negotiate than the buyer is. Now, in the green and the blue areas, those are less competitive. So in those areas, the buyers might have a better opportunity to negotiate more favorable terms, get concessions or rate buy downs, offer less than asking price, and structure that deal differently. And so it greatly depends on zip code to zip code, and even sometimes within each zip code, how that market is going to perform. And so, again, anything yellow, right on pace with about the average in Metro Denver. Our hottest zone came in up here in Northwest Denver at 66.4%, and this is Westminster. Okay. Now, overall, the general thing that I see when I look at this is those items to give you some reference. This is I-25 that runs right down the middle of it. This is C-470 and E-470. This is 225. Here's I-70 and then 76 and Highway 36 as it goes up into Boulder. Okay. So up here, we've got Westminster, Arvada, and Candelas and Leiden Rock. Getting out into Farvada is what we call that.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And so looking out here, generally to the west of I-25 is where I see the highest and the best odds of selling. Where we're seeing lower odds of selling, things turning blue or green, are oftentimes as we get down into these southeast Denver areas, there's a lower odds of selling. There's even some as we get into some of our core central Denver neighborhoods that have traditionally been very hot over a period of time. Lodo, so this is where we find all of the high-rise condos in downtown Denver by Coors Field. Okay, that's Lodo 80202. And then here, this is Sloan's Lake at
Whoa.
4%.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. I didn't see that coming.
And so there's been a shift
Mhm.
in the market, and this has been going on since COVID,
Mhm.
of people leaving the city and favoring the western suburbs.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. It's so interesting. And with Sloan's Lake too, in particular, I'm surprised the number is that low. I'm surprised it's that blue.
Mhm.
But you know, you still look at Sloan's and you're like, nice houses, high prices, right? It's a desirable place to live, but high prices might be one of the reasons that that number is lower right now, and it's a more buyer-friendly market because, homes are sitting on the market longer. And as someone who sits in a fair amount of listing meetings with sellers, it's it's always been a case that they obviously want to list for as much as they can, and the internet's probably telling them that their listing price on their house should be a little higher than it actually should be. But with what we've come through, 21, 22, first part of 20, actually really first part of 22, it's really, I think, hard emotionally and psychologically to wrap your head around the new reality that, well, no, if you bought in 2022 and you're going to sell right now, that price might be flat. It might be up a little bit, it might be flat. And so I think some of that, say, if I bought in 2022, bought for 950, it should be a million oh five right now. That might not be the case. And I'm guessing that's why some of those are sitting on. And by the way, I know Boulder isn't included in the data set here, but we can just assume that that is and always will be so red. It's like a burgundy, dark purple or or no. Yeah.
It depends. I
Yeah.
honestly don't know. I haven't
Yeah.
looked at it and I'm not familiar with those zip codes very
Sure.
much.
Yeah.
And so I can't tell what I've heard from the agents that I work with up there. They're like, it very much so mirrors a lot of what we're seeing
Hmm.
in the 7 counties that you do track. So the data is still relevant to us.
Right.
But it's not necessarily always the same. And so I
Sure.
don't know if there's certain hot spots or cool spots, but Boulder has always been very, very favorable and
Yeah.
people love living up there.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. This 56.9% on the southwest little part there.
Yeah, Ken Carroll Valley.
Aha. Okay. Look
In
at
Carroll
that.
Valley and portions of Roxborough.
Holding strong there for
Yeah,
sure.
so
And
Ken
then,
Carroll Valley has also been very desirable. Portions of Lakewood have
mhm,
always been great because just to the west of Metro Denver,
mhm,
great, great ability to commute to DTC through Hampton or around C470. Sixth Avenue is a great vein into the city. I
Mhm.
lived in Green Mountain before I moved out here, and it was fantastic. I could get, and again, it's been about 10 years and traffic has completely changed since then. But at that point, I could get anywhere in 20 minutes. It was fantastic.
Right.
And so, that's always been a highly desirable area. Also, as we kind of get down into some of the other areas that are a little bit more interesting, what I track is residential resale. And so I don't track new construction. New construction's a beast of its own.
Yeah.
And so when you're looking at some of these areas, what we have to call into question is how much new construction is happening out there. And so one great example of this is the Aurora Highlands as we get out here just south of the airport at 31%. And so that's of the resale listings. There's quite a significant amount of construction that's going on out there. And what builders are doing to incentivize buyers to purchase those properties is that they're offering lower interest rates, not just for a period of time, but for the length of the ownership. And so what's happening is that we've got similar priced homes in resale competing against similar priced new construction homes at a lower interest rate, making them more affordable. And plus, they don't have to go in and do anything to it. And
Yeah.
so we end up seeing that the odds of selling here are lower. Okay. And so we'll see that in areas of new construction. That's also an element within Lodo. There's some new condo constructions happening there. And also out in Sloan's Lake, there's some infill stuff that's happening there as well. As we get down into this is Sterling Ranch down by Chatfield Reservoir. And so again, they're still building out down there. So we see an overall lower odds of selling in that area as well.
Yeah, it's interesting, and you mentioned that new construction is a beast of its own. I talked about that quite a bit on a video a few weeks ago of just like here's what to watch out for with new construction because if you know all new construction will become an existing home at some point, and so if you're buying there in an area like the Aurora Highlands where they're going to be building for I don't know 40 years, it seems like out there, it's a big old project. You're going to
Big,
be
big project.
competing. Yeah, you're going to be competing with this newer inventory coming on the market for a long time. So as long as you're going to stay there for a while, great. But like you're seeing right now, if you're going to sell an existing home right now, it's tough. So that's an interesting distinction that you point out. And that does factor in. I wanted you to ask because we've had some conversation I have had with viewers about the 6 month benchmark for a buyer's and seller's market. So measuring months of inventory, talking about the traditional benchmark for buyers or sellers market is 6 months. Anything over 6 months is buyer market. Anything under 6 months is a seller's market. And there's been some chatter about whether that's changing, whether that's still relevant. Are you do you have any thoughts on that?
So again, when I'm trending stuff, it's not so much what the number is, it's the way the number's moving. And it's very Wayne Gretzky. I want to skate to where the puck is going and not where the puck has been. So it's more important to know is which way is it going? Is it going up or down? And again, the lower it is, the more favorable it is to the seller. The higher it is, the more the buyer has an opportunity to negotiate. Now, the way that that number was determined, it was a benchmark by the National Association of Realtors. And from my understanding, and again, correct me if I'm wrong in my research, but that number was established a couple decades ago. And so even if we go back 20 years, the way that we consumed information as potential home sellers and buyers was that realtors were members of the board in an MLS, the multiple listing service, which disseminated the information about new listings or listing inventory as it was coming to market. The way the information was disseminated up until the late 90s was through an MLS sold book. It was literally a book that was, let me get my hand in there, that was like this,
Oh
that came
God.
out with all the listings every week.
Oh
And
wow.
so the realtors would go to the board or they would pick up their book from their brokerage and they would thumb through these books that had the listings in them that were organized by generalized areas. They typically contained one or a couple photos and brief property description, bedrooms, bathrooms, price, square footage, simple information. And so there wasn't a lot of information, and that information was held under lock and key by the real estate community. And so what you would do as a buyer, you'd sit down with your agent and you would thumb through and say, let's go look at these. And you wouldn't have a lot of information to go off of. So it was a lot of like finding the needle in the haystack, looking at those properties. So the cycle to get the information disseminated, to go out and look at a home and decide if you want to make an offer on it, the life cycle was much longer. Now, if you fast forward to today, the way the information is disseminated is it still goes into the multiple listing service. But then in Colorado, it's syndicated out to 40 to 50,000 different websites. Zillow, Redfin, the brokerage websites, individual broker websites. It's everywhere. And it can be updated as often as every 15 minutes. And buyers that are in the active hunt will oftentimes have something called a prospect search set up. And so they get a notification or an email or a text message, something that says, hey, this just popped up within 15 minutes. And now the content that they're getting on their phone or on their computer within 15 minutes of that listing going live is up to 50 photos of that property, full property content, pricing information. They're oftentimes getting virtual tours where they can virtually walk through the properties, floor plans of the properties. And so they're getting so much more information up front, and they're literally taking seconds to decide if it's something they want to go and see or not. And so the dissemination of the information is so much faster right now that it has sped up the cycle in which buyers decide to make offers or not, or to go see properties or not. And so that's why it's so important as a listing agent and a seller that you are putting your best foot forward, because you only get one chance to make a good impression. Your listing photos have to be professional. Don't use your cell phone.
Oh, but my phone is
Of
so
this
good.
picture,
My
I
phone is
know.
so good at taking pictures.
I know. We used to, it was funny. I worked at the MLS a million years ago. And the agents could request that the MLS would go out and take photos in the early 2000s. And we literally called them drive-by shootings. So it was someone who would drive down the street, they'd take a picture out their window, and they would move on to the next property. And so trash cans in the picture, meh, that's what's going to happen. And so, I mean, your property has to look immaculate online. And people want a virtual tour, and they want it professionally staged, and they want to see it updated. And if they're looking at it and the lighting isn't great, or you don't have a virtual tour, a poor property description, or missing information, people aren't going to go back and take a second look. And so it's critical, absolutely critical, that you are putting all of your effort forward to make your home beautiful, to entice people to come and see it, because they're deciding within seconds if they even want to see your property or not.
Right, right, absolutely, and that's tremendous advice for sellers in this market where things are taking longer. And we'll get you out of here on this because I know we got to wrap up. But real quickly, for buyers who are looking to buy in the next year, 2 years, uh, looking at that data and listening to your analysis, you're saying new normal, right? So you're saying if you're going to buy, start the process. I guess I'll let you answer that question. But what are you doing if you're a home buyer right now, or a potential home buyer in the Denver metro?
Yeah. So number one, I would be asking your agent, do you subscribe to Megan Eller's reports?
Oh, hugely important.
Shameless plug.
Mhm.
And so I would be very specific about with your agent and say, what do you know about your markets? These are the areas that I'm looking about, or I'm new to town. How deep do you go in helping me understand where I have an opportunity to negotiate, or where I may be in a multiple offer situation? And where do you get your information from? Are you up to date on what's happening?
Right.
The consumer has nearly as much access to data as the realtor does, if not more in some cases. And so, as a realtor, you need to be top notch when it comes to data and understanding your micro markets so that you can advise your buyers. Right now, I'm hearing a lot of people say Metro Denver shifts to a hard buyer's market. And I always pop up into the chat window and I say, it depends. It depends.
It
It's
really.
not the same everywhere, and it
Mhm,
changes all over the place.
mhm.
And so you need to be working with an agent that understands their metrics and tracks this consistently, or subscribes to my content and purchases my reports that are available to real estate professionals
Mhm.
so that you can see how it compares through those maps if it's hotter or colder than the average of the Metro Denver market. And so, as a buyer, you want to be working with a very good agent that understands the strategy behind the numbers in order to get going. Now, home ownership is still one of the biggest determining factors of personal wealth. And so, rather than renting, buying a home and using that as a step stool. Now, if you're a first-time home buyer, we're not focused on getting your dream home right now. We're focused on getting you into the market and look at that property as a potential for investment for the future and then stepping up. And so, house hacking is what it's called. Can I turn this into a rental? Can I Airbnb this at some point? Can I cash flow this? Is this an investment? And so, by looking at it that way and then building your equity over time and using that equity to leverage yourself into your dream home or to house hack and slightly move up and start the process over again.
Yes. Yes. And thank you. Thank you so much for saying that, because I've been saying we need to stop using dream home so much for a long time, because it doesn't matter where you are in the process. There'll always be something better. It doesn't matter what the budget is. But you're not going to get your dream home right away. That's for darn sure. But you're never going to get it if you don't, start the process and start, like you are mentioning, building that equity and building that wealth that way to eventually get in that home that is your forever home, if that's a thing. And so, Megan Eller, you are so freaking awesome. Thank you so much for coming on today. Ladies and gentlemen, if this has been valuable to you, Megan and I are partners in the closing process as well. So we would love to work with you. Like I always say on this channel, reach out. We have a great team of folks that buyers, sellers help from beginning to end of the process. So we'd love to have that conversation. But otherwise, thank you so much. Any last words?
Now, thank you so much for having me on. This has been great. Well, hopefully we'll get to do it again soon.
I think we will. Thanks a ton. We'll see you soon. Okay.
All right, thanks, guys. Bye.